Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the 31st webinar in the Offshore Wind series, Learning from the Experts. I'm Jana Herndon. I'm a project manager on NYSERDA's Offshore Wind team, and it's my pleasure to be joined by today's experts, Sarah Stokely, Chris Horrell, Marissa Moshier, and LK Schnitzer with the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management's Office of Renewable Energy Programs. Before I introduce our speakers, a few reminders for participants and some background on this webinar series. Next slide, please. Firstly, if you are experiencing any technical issues, please contact Sal Graven at the email address on the bottom of this slide. This webinar is being recorded, and the recordings and presentation slides for all webinars in the Learning from the Experts series are available on NYSERDA's website at the address on this slide. All participants have been muted. We will have time for Q&A following the presentation, so please use the Q&A function to submit your questions for the speakers. Next slide, please. New York State is working to advance the responsible and cost-effective development of at least 9,000 megawatts of offshore wind by 2035. Offshore wind is a critical component in achieving the state's goals of 70% renewable sources of electricity by 2030 and 100% zero emissions electricity by 2040. While offshore wind has been providing clean energy to other parts of the world for several decades, this industry is brand new to New Yorkers. To provide interested stakeholders and members of the public with accessible, impartial information and opportunities for engagement on specific topics of interest, NYSERDA is hosting this educational webinar series called Learning from the Experts to connect the public with independent experts in key topics in offshore wind. We endeavor to select Learning from the Experts speakers based on their expertise, not necessarily for an alignment of opinions with NYSERDA or the state of New York. If you would like to suggest a topic or speaker for a future webinar, you can email us at offshorewind@nyserda.ny.gov. Or you can fill out a survey also available on our website. Please note that the views and opinions expressed in this presentation are those of the presenters. Next slide, please. It is now my pleasure to introduce our first speaker from BOEM, Sarah Stokely. Sarah joined the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management in the Office of Renewable Energy Programs in 2021 as a lead historian and the Section 106 team lead. She has a master's in science in historic preservation from the University of Pennsylvania and over 18 years of experience in the field of historic preservation. Before joining BOEM, Sarah worked with the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation for 7 years as a program analyst and assisted with Section 106 consultations for multiple federal agencies that provide federal assistance, permits, or licenses, including transportation agencies, the Federal Communications Commission, and the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. Thank you so much to our speakers for joining us today. I'm really looking forward to this webinar, and I will now hand things over to Sarah.
Great, thanks so much, Jana. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for attending this webinar, and we really look forward to this presentation. We can go to the next slide. In today's presentation, I will start with some background information on the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management. We use the acronym BOEM. And for those of you who may be unfamiliar, and we'll be providing an overview of the National Historic Preservation Act Section 106 review process for BOEM's offshore renewable energy projects. Just as a reminder, BOEM is an agency within the U.S. Department of Interior, and the Office of Renewable Energy Programs, or we also use the acronym OREP, at BOEM is tasked with facilitating the responsible development of renewable energy on the Outer Continental Shelf, or OCS, through conscientious planning, stakeholder engagement, comprehensive environmental analysis, and sound technical reviews. The OCS, the Outer Continental Shelf, generally includes the area from the edge of the state jurisdiction underwater to approximately 200 nautical miles from offshore. BOEM oversees the development of renewable energy on the Outer Continental Shelf, and that includes wind, wave, and ocean current energy. The focus of today's presentation will be on offshore wind energy, and specifically will cover BOEM's Section 106 review process. Looking at this slide, The purpose of today's presentation is to provide an overview of BOEM's environmental review and leasing process, including the timing of our Section 106 consultations. We also will describe the Section 106 process and BOEM's Section 106 review. And then finally, we're going to present on BOEM's strategy for implementing the National Environmental Policy Act, also called NEPA, substitution for our Section 106 reviews, and describe the benefits of NEPA substitution. We can go to the next slide. To start off our presentation, I'm going to provide an overview of BOEM's environmental review and leasing process, including the timing of our Section 106 consultations. We can go to the next slide. This slide might be familiar. We call it the rainbow slide. And this is a really helpful graphic describing BOEM's phased leasing process. And it also includes when the National Historic Preservation Act Section 106 review occurs within the broader offshore wind project environmental review process. So this graphic is illustrating the phased leasing process that's conducted and led by BOEM for offshore wind projects. The numbers that you see on this graphic indicate the approximate duration in years of each step. So looking at the left-hand side of the graphic, you will see the NEPA environmental reviews indicated toward the beginning of the process, and this refers to our review under the National Environmental Policy Act. At this stage, BOEM prepares an environmental assessment, or an EA, to fulfill our NEPA requirement for the area identification and leasing notices. The Section 106 review process is carried out at the same time and in coordination with the NEPA review. The process begins with the planning analysis stage, which identifies suitable areas for offshore wind development. And then the leasing stage usually involves issuing a lease to a qualified wind energy developer. The next stage includes a site assessment stage, and that requires the lessees to submit a site assessment plan. We also use the acronym SAP for the construction or installation of meteorological towers or buoys. BOEM is also required to review the SAP. And then finally, the lessee or the developer then submits a detailed construction and operation plan. We also use the acronym COP for the construction of the wind energy project. Finally, prior to decommissioning, which you see in the far right side of the graphic, the lessee must submit a plan, and a separate NEPA and Section 106 review occurs at that time. The Section 106 review is first conducted during this early planning analysis stage, and BOEM has determined that issuing commercial or research leases within the wind energy areas and granting right-of-ways and right-of-use constitute an undertaking that's subject to Section 106. And then we've also determined that the subsequent site characterization activities resulting from the lease or grant issuance constitute activities that have the potential to cause effects on historic properties. These effects are usually limited geotechnical sampling and studies and related activities that may impact the seafloor. After the lease is granted, BOEM enters the site assessment phase, during which the lessee will develop that site assessment plan and will conduct numerous surveys and studies, culminating with the submittal of the construction operation plan. The lessee's SAP must be approved by BOEM, and it undergoes its own NEPA and Section 106 review before the lessee can conduct the site assessment activities on the lease. BOEM may approve with modifications, or disapprove a lessee's SAP. It is also during this phase that the lessee would conduct site characterization surveys and other studies, for example, avian, marine mammal, and archaeological surveys. At the SAP stage, we've usually determined that these site surveys have minimal or no potential to affect historic properties. BOEM has previously given a detailed presentation on the construction operation plan review process that's also available online from NYSERDA, and we will provide a link to that later in the presentation. The construction operation plan describes the project design envelope proposed by the lessee, which contains the proposed project and alternatives. It also includes environmental technical reports to support the NEPA review process, including technical reports on cultural resources, which we'll describe in more detail later in this presentation. Once the COP is complete and determined sufficient, BOEM enters the environmental and technical review stage. At this stage, BOEM initiates another NEPA review, and we conduct an environmental impact statement, and also conducts Section 106 reviews associated for our review and eventually our decision to approve, disapprove, or approve with conditions for the COP. Once a COP is approved, the lessee can move forward with submitting a design and installation plans and then proceed with the installation of their project. You can go to the next slide. This is just a helpful reminder of BOEM's offshore wind Section 106 consultations. BOEM conducts public outreach, engagement, and consultation with federally recognized tribes, local, state, and federal agencies, and Section 106 consulting parties throughout the lease area development process to complete the NEPA and Section 106 reviews of the different Section 106 consultations that are required. Section 106 consulting parties can include federally recognized tribes, the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation, and relevant state historic preservation offices, local governments, preservation organizations, and other interested parties. BOEM has several regional programmatic agreements, we also call them PAs, in place to fulfill its obligations under Section 106 for renewable energy activities on the outer continental shelf. Specifically, BOEM has a programmatic agreement for New Jersey and New York. The link to this agreement is provided in this presentation. BOEM develops regional programmatic agreements through consultation with federally recognized tribes and consulting parties to define a more consistent Section 106 review process. These PAs describe the consultation process for the relevant decision points in the offshore renewable energy development process, including the leasing, the site assessments, and planned approvals. We will provide more details regarding how and what and when BOEM conducts specific Section 106 consultations under the next sections of the presentation. And we also will go over BOEM's procedures for Section 106 reviews. Before I hand over the presentation to Marissa Moshier, I just wanted to quickly introduce Marissa. She's an architectural historian with over 10 years of experience working in historic preservation in the public and private sectors. She currently works in the Office of Renewable Energy Programs at BOEM, where her focus is the assessment of visual effects to historic properties from renewable energy projects. She also leads Section 106 consultations under the National Historic Preservation Act for multiple offshore wind projects. With that, I'll hand over the presentation to Marissa.
Thanks, Sarah, and good afternoon, everyone. It's nice to be with you today. So I'm going to transition to BOEM's procedures for conducting Section 106 review under the National Historic Preservation Act. Let's go to the next slide. And we can actually continue to the next. So I'll be talking about the fundamentals of Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act, which requires federal agencies to consider the effects of their undertakings on historic properties. And the key terms there are undertaking and historic property, both of which are defined in the regulations for Section 106 of the NHPA. So an undertaking is a project, activities, or program funded in whole or in part under the direct or indirect jurisdiction of a federal agency, including those that are carried out by or on behalf of a federal agency, those carried out with federal financial assistance, and those requiring a federal permit, license, or approval. And then a historic property is defined as any district, site, building, structure, or object included in or eligible for inclusion in the National Register of Historic Places, which is maintained by the Secretary of the Interior, delegated to the National Park Service. And properties of traditional religious and cultural importance to Native American tribes or Native Hawaiian organizations may also be determined eligible for inclusion in the National Register. Let's go to the next slide. So federal agencies meet the requirement to consider the effects of their undertakings on historic properties through the Section 106 process that is set forth in the implementing regulations titled Protection of Historic Properties at 36 CFR Part 800. And the goal of the Section 106 process is to identify and consider historic properties that may be affected by an undertaking, and to attempt to resolve any adverse effects to those historic properties through consultation. So that process provides for participation by Native American tribes, tribal historic preservation officers or THPOs, tribal, state, and local governments, state historic preservation officers or SHPOs, applicants for federal assistance permits or licenses, representatives from interested organizations, private citizens, and the public. And through this Section 106 process, federal agencies strive to reach agreement with consulting parties on measures to avoid, minimize, and mitigate adverse effects on historic properties, and to find a balance between the project goals and preservation objectives. Let's go to the next slide. So the Section 106 review process includes 4 major steps, and I'll walk through this flow chart that illustrates these steps at a high level, and then we'll discuss BOEM's actions at each step in more detail. And I do want to note that this flow chart is adapted from the Council on Environmental Quality and the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation's 2013 Handbook for Integrating NEPA and Section 106. Which is available on both agencies' websites. So for step 1, that's initiating the process, BOEM addresses the primary question of, is the project an undertaking with potential to cause effects on historic properties? And if the answer is no, then the Section 106 process is completed and BOEM has no further obligations. But if yes, then we continue to step 2. And step 2 is identifying historic properties. And during that step, BOEM addresses the primary question of, are historic properties present in the area of potential effects, or APE, and are they affected by the project? And if not, then again, the process is completed with BOEM issuing a finding of no historic properties affected. But if yes, then we continue to step 3 in the process. And step 3 is assessing adverse effects. And during this step, BOEM addresses the question of, are historic properties adversely affected by the project? So an adverse effect is defined in the regulations as occurring when an undertaking may alter, either directly or indirectly, any of the characteristics of a property that qualify that property for inclusion in the National Register of Historic Places, in a manner that would diminish the property's integrity. So adverse effects may include reasonably foreseeable effects caused by the undertaking that may occur later in time, that may be farther removed in distance from the undertaking, or that may be cumulative. And this process of assessing effects is documented in a finding of effect document that's issued by BOEM. If the project does not result in a finding of adverse effect, the Section 106 process is complete with BOEM's issuance of a finding of no adverse effect, again, including consultation. And if BOEM determines there will be an adverse effect to historic property, then we issue a finding of adverse effect, and the process continues to step 4. Step 4 is resolving adverse effects. And during that step, through consultation with consulting parties, BOEM develops avoidance, minimization, and mitigation measures to resolve or reduce adverse effects to historic properties. And an agreement document is then developed in this stage, either a memorandum of agreement or a programmatic agreement between BOEM, the affected state historic preservation officers, and the project lessee as signatories. The ACHP may also serve as a signatory, and other consulting parties may also sign as concurring parties to that agreement. Let's go to the next slide. So I'll explain in a little bit more detail the steps of the Section 106 review process and how BOEM conducts outreach and consultation. So in this first step, if BOEM determines that there is an undertaking, BOEM identifies and notifies Native American tribes, the affected SHPOs, and the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation of the undertaking. BOEM also identifies and invites other potentially interested consulting parties to consultation and makes a plan to involve the public. So BOEM may assign a third-party contractor to a particular project to help facilitate that Section 106 consultation process, but all federal oversight and decisions remain with BOEM. So that third-party contractor's role is administrative to help coordinate and assist BOEM with the consultation. So BOEM and their third-party contractor our third-party contractor identify and invite potential Section 106 consulting parties to participate in the Section 106 review process. And we'll explain a little bit about the NEPA substitution process, but those consultation invitations can also include notification of the issuance of a notice of intent, or NOI, to prepare an environmental impact statement for the project, along with a description of BOEM's intent to use NEPA substitution and a description of the role of that third-party contractor. Federally recognized tribes may also directly contact BOEM's Renewable Energy Tribal Liaison Coordinator if they have any concerns or questions, or if they would like to set up a government-to-government meeting. And then as part of the NEPA substitution process and as part of the project review process, after issuance of the notice of intent, BOEM also holds public scoping meetings to which Section 106 consulting parties and the public are invited. So those NEPA public scoping meetings are used as a platform to provide information on the overall project, as well as the Section 106 process to the public. And during those scoping meetings, the public and consulting parties are encouraged to propose design alternatives, identify historic properties that may be impacted by the project, and propose mitigation measures that may avoid, minimize, or mitigate any adverse effects. That's in addition to the specific Section 106 consultation meetings for consulting parties. Let's go to the next slide. So in step 2 of the Section 106 process, BOEM will determine the project's area of potential effects, or APE, identify historic properties that are within that APE, consult with tribes, SHPOs, and other consulting parties, as well as involving the public. And then it's in BOEM's guidelines, BOEM describes how to determine that APE for marine archaeological resources, terrestrial archaeological resources, and above ground cultural resources. And lessees use these guidelines to develop a preliminary APE, which is provided in the construction and operations plan and is used for the initial identification of historic properties. So the lessee must provide technical reports with the construction and operations plan for the project to document that preliminary APE, the methodology that's used for developing the APEs and for identifying historic properties, and the results of the identification process. And these reports are known as the Marine Archaeological Resources Assessment, or MARA, the Terrestrial Archaeological Resources Assessment, or TARA, and Historic Resources Visual Effects Assessment, or HARVI. I apologize for the large number of acronyms. The reports also provide a preliminary assessment of effects from the onshore and offshore project components on historic properties. And the COP, the Construction and Operations Plan, and these technical reports are reviewed by BOEM subject matter experts. BOEM, in addition to reviewing the reports that are prepared by the lessee, BOEM also develops a cumulative historic resources visual effects assessment, or a cumulative HARVI. And that report specifically analyzes the cumulative impacts of reasonably foreseeable wind energy development, the cumulative visual impacts, I should say, on historic properties. And then BOEM delineates the final APE for the project and continues to consult with tribes, SHPOs, and other consulting parties, including providing the reports I just described to tribes, SHPOs, and other consulting parties for review and comment. And with that, I'll turn the presentation over to Chris Horrell to provide more information on the 3 technical reports that document the identification of historic properties, and then go through the remaining Section 106 steps. So Chris Horrell is a marine archaeologist with the Section 106 team in the Office of Renewable Energy Programs. So Chris, take it away.
Thank you, Marissa, and thank you all for participating in this webinar today. The Marine Archaeological Resources Assessment, or MARA, documents the identification and preliminary assessment of a project's potential physical effects on historic archaeological resources and ancient submerged landform features, or ASLFs, that may contain pre-contact sites. These historic properties are located on both the outer continental shelf and within state waters. The MARA investigations begin with defining the marine portion of the preliminary APE, or the PAPE. The marine PAPE includes both the depth and breadth of the seabed potentially impacted by any bottom disturbing activities and all offshore geographic areas in which these activities are proposed to occur. These offshore areas include the lease area and export cable corridors needed to transform power to onshore facilities. These activities may include temporary or permanent construction and staging areas. The marine PAPE developed and assessed in the MARA includes all geographical areas proposed for offshore activities for all variants of the project presented in the COP. The MARA includes background research and field investigations to identify previously known and previously undocumented marine archaeological resources and ASLFs in the marine PAPE. The identification process includes a systematic high-resolution remote sensing survey, geotechnical testing, and occasionally diver visual inspections. Investigations are conducted under the direction of a qualified marine archaeologist in a manner that conforms to the methods and reporting guidance provided by BOEM and through coordination with affected SHPOs and states. Next slide, please. The Terrestrial Archaeological Resources Assessment, or TARA, documents the identification and assessment of potential physical effects on terrestrial archaeological resources, including resources from the pre-contact period or the time before contact between native peoples and Europeans occurred, and resources from the post-contact period, the time after which contact between native peoples and Europeans took place. Archaeological investigations within onshore terrestrial areas conform to the methods and reporting guidance provided by BOEM and through coordination with the affected SHPOs. The TAR investigations begin with defining the terrestrial portion of the PAPE, which includes the depth and breadth of all terrestrial areas potentially impacted by ground disturbing activities and all onshore geographic areas in which these activities are proposed to occur, including areas of temporary or permanent construction, such as substation and landfall sites, and the installation of onshore cable routes, vegetation removal, and staging areas. The TARA includes background research and field investigations to identify previously known and previously undocumented terrestrial archaeological resources. The identification process typically includes systematic subsurface testing to identify archaeological resources. Investigations are conducted under the direction of a qualified archaeologist in a manner that conforms to methods and reporting guidance provided by BOEM and through coordination with affected SHPOs and states. Next slide. The Historic Resources Visual Effects Assessment, or HARVI, documents the identification and assessment of potential effects on above-ground resources that are historic properties. Potential effects include visual, physical, atmospheric, audible, and vibrational, or any other type of direct or indirect effects on historic properties. The Harvey investigations conform to methods and reporting guidance provided by BOEM and through coordination with the affected SHPOs. The PAPE for the Harvey is designed for both offshore project components, including wind turbine generators, and onshore project components such as substations or converter stations, landfall locations, and cable routes. The PAPE is defined through a process of viewshed modeling that identifies potential views of the onshore and offshore components, accounting for the height of these components, the distance between the components and historic properties, the Earth's curvature, and intervening vegetation, structures, and topography. This provides a model of theoretical visibility that is used to define the PAPE. This information is also used to develop BOEM's cumulative Harvey, which accounts for the cumulative impacts of reasonably foreseeable developmental activities within a geographic analysis area. This development includes other offshore wind projects of which historic properties may have a view of. Next slide. In step 3 of the Section 106 process, BOEM will apply the criteria of an adverse effect as defined in Section 106 of the NHPA to all identified historic properties and consult with tribes, SHPOs, and other consulting parties and involve the public. The overall purpose of this step is to ensure that BOEM has adequately provided the results of the agency's identification and evaluation efforts in a manner that effectively uses the draft NEPA document to share information with consulting parties and with the public. To reiterate, as defined in Section 106 regulations, adverse effects are those that alter any characteristic that qualifies the property for inclusion on the National Register of Historic Places, or diminishes the integrity of the property's location, design, setting, materials, workmanship, feeling, or association. This may include reasonably foreseeable effects caused by the undertaking occurring later in time or further removed in distance, or those that are cumulative. Next slide. In the context of offshore wind development, adverse effects are most relevant the adverse effects that are most relevant include physical destruction or damage to all of a part of a property, change in the character of the property's physical features within the property setting that contribute to its historic significance, and the introduction of visual elements that diminish the integrity of the property's significant historic features and setting. Other examples of adverse effects are included in the Section 106 regulations. Again, this information will be provided in the draft NEPA document, which will be made available for review by tribes, SHPOs, consulting parties, and the public. Next slide, please. If BOEM determines that an undertaking will result in an adverse effect to historic properties, BOEM would notify and consult with tribes, SHPO, ACHP, and consulting parties to develop and implement measures to avoid, minimize, or mitigate adverse effects. A memorandum of agreement, or MOA, would be developed to define the measures to resolve adverse effects to historic properties. This agreement document is circulated to consulting parties for review and to designated signatories for execution. After the Bureau reviews are completed, redacted versions of the Section 106 technical reports are supplied to the general public. In addition, BOEM's finding of effect document and the MOA are incorporated into the NEPA EIS as attachments. Unredacted versions of the technical reports are made available to tribes, SHPOs, the ACHP, consulting parties, and to the public. This ensures that BOEM has adequately provided the results of the agency's identification and evaluation efforts in a manner that effectively uses the NEPA document to share information with consulting parties and the public. BOEM will distribute the draft EIS and final EIS to tribes, SHPOs, the ACHP, and other consulting parties, and these documents are available for public comment. Comments on the draft EIS are incorporated into the final EIS as applicable. I'm now going to turn this over to LK Schnitzer, who is our tourist archaeologist, and she's going to discuss the NEPA substitution process.
Yes, thank you. As Chris mentioned, I'll be providing more information on NEPA substitution, which is a process that allows BOEM to coordinate and streamline its National Environmental Protection Act, or NEPA, and Section 106 reviews throughout an offshore wind COP review process. Next slide, please. Actually, let's go to the next one. Great. Okay. So the NHPA Section 106 regulations allow federal agencies to use the NEPA process to fulfill Section 106 review obligations in lieu of the typical four-step process that Marissa outlined earlier. And this process is known as NEPA substitution. BOEM is implementing NEPA substitution for Section 106 review during our environmental review of construction and operation plans, or COPs. And this has been after careful consideration of lessons learned from earlier COP consultations, as well as a reflection of what our various parties' needs are. And these needs include BOEM's need for an efficient, streamlined approach that better integrates NHPA and NEPA reviews, both thematically and in terms of their schedules. It includes our tribal partners' needs for a greater focus on government-to-government consultation, our consulting parties' need for earlier consultation on mitigation measures, and also the lessees or the developers' need for clearer expectations on what the timeline is for the environmental review and the cost of mitigation. And BOEM is using this process on all of our current offshore wind project COP reviews. Let's go to the next slide. So I know this is National Historic Preservation Act 106 presentation, but I wanted to take a minute here just to give a brief overview of NEPA. So NEPA requires federal agencies to assess the environmental effects of proposed actions prior to making decisions. And a NEPA analysis must consider alternatives that could reduce or eliminate impacts, including at a minimum the proposed action and a no action alternative. And the description of the affected environment in the NEPA document or the environmental impact statement will include reasonably foreseeable environmental trends and planned actions other than the proposed project. And we have included a link in this slide to an earlier NYSERDA presentation that's more specific to BOEM's leasing process and our NEPA review. And that, I think that is available online. Let's go to the next slide. Okay. To use NEPA substitution, BOEM has to take several steps. First, BOEM must notify affected SHPOs or state historic preservation officers and the Advisory Council for Historic Preservation that it is intending to use NEPA substitution. BOEM must also identify consulting parties in a manner that is consistent with Section 106 regulations. BOEM must also identify historic properties and assess effects on those properties in a manner that is consistent with identification and assessment in Section 106 regulations. BOEM must also consult about the actions effects with tribes, SHPOs, and other consulting parties during the NEPA scoping analysis and documentation. And finally, BOEM must develop mitigation measures in consultation with other parties and describe these measures in its environmental impact statement. Let's go to the next slide. So this graphic illustrates the more traditional approaches for both Section 106 and NEPA environmental impact statement review process. Section 106 review would usually occur independently of the NEPA process, and there would be an opportunity for coordination between the two, but they would proceed along on parallel tracks, kind of like this. Go to the next slide. And the way BOEM has been implementing NEPA substitution, the stages and the milestones of the Section 106 process are integrated with the NEPA process. And this ensures that Section 106 review is completed on the same schedule as NEPA. This also provides for the Section 106 identification of historic properties, the finding of effect, and measures to avoid, minimize, or mitigate adverse effects to all be integrated into the NEPA document. And it gives consulting parties an opportunity to discuss and comment on the draft NEPA document. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, and this is just another graphic providing an overview of the way BOEM's NEPA substitution process for an environmental impact statement integrates Section 106 milestones. And I think, yeah, and in this graphic, the 106 stages are shown in bold underneath each column for each NEPA milestone. Let's go to the next slide. NEPA substitution is part of a multifaceted approach, which is, we think, is suitable for BOEM's program needs, and it also allows for certain benefits. And NEPA substitution, some examples of that are that NEPA substitution allows for a more holistic approach to government consultations with federally recognized Native American tribes, because we don't have to separate consultations about environmental, social, and economic impacts from the cultural resource and historic property impacts. We do have that option, but we can also have a more holistic consultation. Another benefit is that the Section 106 and NEPA reviews will be better synchronized, including development and modification of alternatives. NEPA substitution allows for early Section 106 consultation in the beginning stages of the NEPA review. So tribes, SHPOs, the advisory council, if participating, and other consulting parties' early involvement in the development of these alternatives and the consideration of historic preservation issues are a big benefit to both the NEPA and the Section 106 processes. And additionally, NEPA substitution also ensures public involvement and comment solicitation for Section 106 related findings and determinations due to the requirement that identification of historic properties, the finding of effect, and our avoidance, minimization, and mitigation measures be integrated into the NEPA document or the environmental impact statement. So in summary, NEPA substitution for Section 106 review is now BOEM's approved approach. We have been using it for a little while, and I think we'll be continuing to use it going forward. Our process for NEPA substitution has been and is being refined based on lessons learned from prior COP consultations, as well as reflection on the needs of various parties. And BOEM is using NEPA substitution to maintain the structure of the more typical or traditional four-step Section 106 process. And this process is just being integrated with NEPA milestones and schedule. Let's go to the next slide. Yeah, so in closing, I just wanted to thank everyone so much for attending our presentation today. I wanted to point out that our contact information is included on this slide, and I think we are ready to invite any questions that you all may have.
Thank you, LK, and thank you to the BOEM team for that presentation. Just echoing what LK said, please remember to submit your questions through the Q&A function, and we will try to get through as many as we can in the next 14 minutes. So I will kick us off by posing a question to the BOEM team. Can you please expand on what happens when an offshore wind project is determined to have an adverse effect?
Hi, Jana. I'm going to answer that question, and thank you so much for the question. So to kind of build off of what we've already talked about in this presentation, when we make a finding of adverse effect, that finding is for the entire undertaking. And so when we've determined that there's going to be an adverse effect, we notify the federally recognized tribes, the appropriate state historic preservation officers, and when we have in particular with the visual APE, we might have more than one SHPO involved in the consultation, as well as for some of the onshore activities where the cables are going onshore, they go to one or more states, and we need to consult with multiple SHPOs. We also notify the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation and the consulting parties, and we kind of highlighted what the consulting parties would be. And we share with them our finding of adverse effect. And this finding is explained and justified in our, we call it a finding of adverse effect report. And in this report, we provide an overview of the project, a written explanation, and graphic illustration of the area potential effects, and that's the marine area potential effects, the terrestrial, and the visual area potential effects. We also include a description of the steps taken to identify historic properties, and this is part of working with, working with the developer. Is that as when they submit their COP, they're submitting these very detailed reports identifying it's the Marine Archaeological Resources Assessment, the Terrestrial Archaeological Resources Assessment, and the Historic Resources Visual Effects Assessment. We kind of highlight in this report the steps taken in which, the numbers of historic properties that have been identified. Then we provide a description of the application of the criteria of adverse effect, and we've provided that definition of the criteria of adverse effect, which is in the Section 106 regulations. And then we also, at that stage, are proposing avoidance, minimization, and mitigation measures. So we bundle this together. It's in a report, and we share this with the tribes, the ACHP, if they're participating in the consultation, the consulting parties, and the SHPOs. And we're allowing a review period. Usually during that review period, we are conducting a Section 106 consultation meeting to help explain how we got to this adverse effect finding. And we are allowing, usually it's a 30-day calendar review period, but because of the amount of material that's being provided, we're trying to provide more than 30 days to allow sufficient time for the review. And so after that review period has concluded, we receive comments, and we review the comments, and we make any necessary modifications to that finding of adverse effect. And that could include where someone provides additional information about a historic property that wasn't included in our analysis. It could also include that someone has concerns that another historic property could be adversely affected that we didn't include in our finding. And it's like almost a dialogue that is occurring. And then we collect these comments, and we then make any necessary edits to our finding of adverse effect, and then we allow, another review period or more than one review period. So I think that's just a quick, explanation.
Yeah, that's wonderful. There's a lot of
Yes.
information there. So a few follow-up questions in that regard. So when you have a finding of adverse effect, are there any degrees to which you find that effect? Like, is there a ranking of the level of the effect, or it's just a blanket designation, whether that be a minor adverse effect or a major adverse effect?
Yeah, thanks, Jana. And honestly, I'm going to go back to my work I did at the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation, where I gave a lot of training on Section 106 to help answer that. So Section 106 is a little bit different than NEPA. You know, under Section 106, it's an adverse effect or it's not an adverse effect. We can include information about the intensity of the adverse effect, but it is applying that criteria of the adverse effect is what you need to go back and look at that you know definition explanation in the regulations. So that's when the undertaking may alter directly or indirectly any of the characteristics of a historic property that qualify that property for inclusion in the National Register of Historic Places that would diminish its integrity. And also these adverse effects could be reasonably foreseeable effects that can occur later in time, be farther removed in distance, or be cumulative. So we don't make any, we don't say if it's major or minor in the Section 106 realm. So I hope that's answering the question.
It is, thank you.
Yeah.
Another follow-up question is, are you able to provide some specific examples of adverse effects in the context of historic and cultural resources from offshore wind projects?
Yeah, I will pause because I also want other people that are of the group to help answer. And we can maybe unpack that question a little bit. And so just to make sure I'm understanding the question is that you want examples of the types of adverse effects related with offshore. Yeah,
That's correct. That is the question.
okay. So we can maybe break it down by the area potential effects. And so we can talk about with the marine APE, the type of adverse effects we see with underwater sites are, for example, in the lease area or in where the cable routes are proposed. And I'll let Chris answer because he's very familiar with the types of adverse effects for the marine APE. Chris, if you want to answer that.
Yeah, so as I said earlier, the primary resources that we're looking at in the marine environment include shipwrecks and the ancient submerged landforms that may contain archaeological remains or sites. As far as adverse effects go, you know, any bottom disturbing activity that could come into contact with the resources is of concern. And this could include everything from the ground tackle on the bottom, the chain, sweep, all those kinds of activities. When they're laying a cable, for example, they'll catch forward with these anchors, and we want to make sure that they don't impact these sites. But if they do, then there's the potential that this harm is irreversible, and there'll be some sort of enforcement that needs to take place. Same goes with the ASLFs. These are, you know, horizontally voided. Avoidance is always the preferred approach to this for shipwrecks and for the ASLFs, but avoidances are provided to the developer, and you know, if they're not able to avoid, or if they have to impact, or there is an adverse effect, we're looking not just at the horizontal distribution of the site, but also its vertical depth to understand, you know, where the impacts occurred and what they might be. So I'm not sure if that is helpful, but
Yeah, and then I don't know if LK, if you want to talk about the types of adverse effects on shore.
Yeah, sure. So for terrestrial archaeology, the types of impacts we're seeing from offshore wind development activities would be physical impacts to archaeological sites onshore. So that could be from the new construction of a substation or a switching station, or the other one that we see more frequently even is trenching for interconnection cables onshore, which typically go beneath paved, either within existing right-of-way or in paved roadbed. But as Chris was mentioning, you know, you can have intact archaeological deposits at varying depths, so that's always a factor. But in terms of our avoidance, minimization, and mitigation measures that we are commonly implementing in the terrestrial APE, avoidance is always the first option, and that would mean that an archaeological historic property or a site that is believed to be eligible for the National Register of Historic Places is completely avoided by construction activities, and there would be, that's always our preference. If avoidance isn't possible, then we will try to minimize impacts through monitoring measures, having qualified archaeological monitors available during construction activities. And then if we know there's going to be an adverse effect or an impact from construction, we will implement mitigation measures, which are most often phase 3 data recovery excavations, but they can certainly include other creative mitigations as well, such as like historic context development and that sort of thing. But these measures are all developed through consultation with our tribal partners, SHPOs, and other consulting parties. And I'll give it to Marissa to talk about visual AMM.
Yeah, thanks. Okay. I'll just say quickly, when we're talking about the potential adverse effects to above ground historic properties from this offshore wind development, we're primarily looking at whether there are visual impacts to historic properties. So whether the presence of wind turbines within the view shed of a historic property is impacting the integrity of that historic property's setting. So that is a multi-step process to first identify the historic properties that are within that visual APE, and then also take a look at, for those specific properties, whether a view of the ocean is a character defining feature of that property's setting. And, you know, for some examples of those types of historic properties, that might be a lighthouse that has a sweeping ocean view, you know, from the top of the lighthouse platform, or a historic residence that was specifically designed to take in a view of the ocean. And then once we've identified those properties with character defining ocean views, so determining whether the change that is caused by the presence of those wind turbines is an adverse effect. And it goes back to what Sarah was describing about the criteria for determining an adverse effect, whether that change to the view shed is impacting the property's integrity.
Wonderful. So much information there. And sadly, we're reaching the conclusion of our time here. Unfortunately, we didn't have time to get to many questions, but I will wrap us up since we only have 1 minute left. Sal, if you could go to the next slide, please. First, I just want to thank our speakers for providing so much wonderful information. I hope everyone enjoyed today's webinar. And a reminder that the recording and presentation slides will be available on NYSERDA's website. Registration information for future webinars in this series will also be posted on our website. The next webinars in the series are a double header with the Bureau of Safety and Environmental Enforcement, or BSEE. On Wednesday, June 14th, BSEE will discuss overseeing offshore wind from design to decommissioning. And on Thursday, June 29th, they will discuss worker safety in offshore wind. You can register for future webinars on our events page. A shortcut is wind.ny.gov. If you have requests for future topics you'd like to hear about in this series, please email us at offshorewind@nyserda.ny.gov. Thank you everyone for joining us today, and we'll see you next time.